Welcome again to the AI Nation podcast, a podcast that is all about the German AI startup scene. Today, I'm really excited to talk with Dylan from CareMates. He's the co-founder and managing director, and they have the goal to make the process within the care industry as smooth as possible. I'm really interested to know what he has to say about the care industry and about his personal journey as an entrepreneur. Let's go.
Nice. Hey, that's amazing.
Don't worry, we can do that.
Super cool, yeah.
Nice. All right. Maybe let's start with something else like CareMates.
Yeah.
What's it all about?
CareMates is all about unburdening caregivers with technology. Essentially, we built a CRM software for the elderly care sector because they receive so many patient admissions. Every country in the world is getting older, and we have a shortage of caregivers. So the caregivers we have, they spend 1/3 of their time on bureaucracy, documentation, and only 2/3 of really treating the patients. So what our goal is with CareMates is to reduce the 1/3 to zero, to open up space to treat the patients, but to also have a coffee in between, to be unburdened and to have a nice working experience.
That's such a nice mission, actually, that you're working on. Like, I think everyone who understands the healthcare system or who had to work with caregivers knows how much almost burned out they already are.
Yeah.
And I think what they want to do is not fill out documents for their patients. They want to help them and they want to support them. So you're enabling them to do that. But let's go maybe back in the time. What made you become a founder?
What made me become a founder? Like, that's a good question. Essentially, I think like you always understand these things in the past, right? Looking back, you connect the dots. And what I can see, like, already as a kid, I used to give my parents like massages, like a foot massage for like 30 cents an hour. So that was like my first like entrepreneurial experience. Not with a very good salary. I wouldn't do that anymore. But that was like the first. And my mom has always been like very business savvy herself. She's a caregiver. I'll come to that later on. So we are like 4 kids. I have 3 brothers. Both my parents were caregivers back then. So kind of money was always a little bit tough. And what my mom did was also like going to flea markets, just like buying trip shop chairs or something here and there and reselling it on eBay. So also there, I think I got this side from my mom a lot. And then during school, I used to buy and sell Nintendo games on eBay. So that's something I did to like earn my own money because like with 14, I was working in a factory and I used to like scan stuff, work with people who like didn't have a very positive outlook on life. And then I also bought a camera and did some photos of my friends, and essentially an uncle reached out who wanted very authentic pictures for his CV. So I did that and essentially got into the business of helping people reach their dream career by also designing their CV, application letter, and interview coaching. So that was like the first business where I put like a logo behind. It's called like Dream Job Studio. I did that for 3 years during university. That was also my first experience with like writing invoices, handling German bureaucracy, because essentially it's like a stepping stone, right, to
Of course.
to becoming an entrepreneur. And having these small learnings of solving a problem, getting your first money, figuring out the bureaucracy, etc., creating your logo, marketing, etc. Then I joined Manager More here in Munich, and there I really had a proper entrepreneurship development. I learned design thinking from Thomas Kirchner, from the ProGlove founder. Yeah, later on met my co-founders for CareMates. And I think that's also something we're going to get to.
Yeah,
soon.
exactly. Such a nice overview. Thank you for that. So it seems that being an entrepreneur is almost part of your DNA. So you've talked about your co-founder. What is important when you look for a co-founder?
Like seeing problems. Essentially, as an entrepreneur, you can solve problems and create a business from that. But there's also the dimension to do a tech push, right? So you have a cool technology, you maybe come from university, you're very specialized, and you want to find a problem to a solution that you kind of already have. And for me, it was always the other way, like seeing a problem and then offering a solution. And that's why also like the whole approach of design thinking, which I learned at Manager More and from Thomas Kirchner, was so helpful for my journey. And just to maybe understand also where I come from.
Yeah.
So I'm not kind of the PhD founder here.
Yeah.
Essentially, finding your co-founder, probably there is not the one recipe. For us, I met two of my co-founders here at a program, the Digital Product School, where also CareMate started. And it was a bit of a coincidence. We were just matched together in a group. Originally, we were 5 people. And the other co-founder, Zoran, he also did Manager More. So he's also from the Munich entrepreneurship bubble, but he did it 10 years prior to me, founded a company in the meantime, very successful. And he joined us after 8 to 9 months working on CareMates in this original team of 5 people.
So how did you meet the third co-founder? Did you meet him like just by chance, serendipity, or have you met him on an event where you can go, or a hackathon or anything like that?
The amazing thing about the Munich entrepreneurship bubble and the Unternehmertum is that there's a program for every step of your journey. And we started at the Digital Product School, and after that we did Explore, Market Pioneer as a program where there were several expert sessions. And he did one of the expert sessions. So Zoran was an expert. He was looking for co-founders at that time. He actually held a presentation on how to find co-founders. So I was just curious, listening in. And at that time, he was already doing like 100 coffee chats with tech and business people. And he's a very structured guy. So he did the 50 co-founder questions. He filled them out for himself. It's basically answering questions on every important dimension of a founder, like what working time do you want to have? Where are your strengths? Where do you want to bring business? How fast should it go? Etc. So he filled it, and he also let the other people fill it, and then they met for a coffee and saw if it matched. So that's already like a really nice strategy. Zoran and I also did that later on in the whole team. And after the session, I just asked him, hey, so I'm doing this project. I'm really excited about CareMates, but we're 5 people. We are from 4 different continents. How can I make a co-founder team out of this? And essentially, he supported me with a lot of questions I had, listened to the pitch I gave him of CareMates, and after that, he really gave like amazing tips. And he also said, like, by the way, that's such an interesting business model, such a high impact topic. I would love to see if maybe also we are a fit here. We're a product team coming from the DPS, and I had like a lot of responsibility on product, business, legal, finance, etc. So I was looking for a counterpart here. And essentially, Zoran turned out to be the fit. And now we're 4 co-founders and have all the competencies in the team to bring CareMates alive, to scale it. So that's how, we all met.
That's amazing. It's such a nice story, actually, and a really intelligent approach on the whole thing. You've mentioned that you've been wearing many hats as a CEO. What were the challenges that you wouldn't even have thought of before you started that journey?
That's a great question. Maybe also generally because like we immediately think we have to like have a CEO as a startup, but at the same time, CEO is like a title from America, kind of. So we don't have these C titles at CareMates. We have 2 managing directors, Zoran and me. I really see us as like bring like the best together, the 4 of us, to make the decisions. So the 4 of us are the CEO in a way, and some people are more outward facing, some are more inward facing. The first thing maybe that I can say is, personally, like I'm a very naive person. Like I just like get into things, and then I realize, oh, okay, now I have to do this and then that and then that. And I love this attitude, because if I already knew 2 years ago when we started what I had to do, I probably would have said like, hell no, let's get the hell out of here and get a job somewhere. But essentially, it's such a ride, and you learn with every challenge that you get. And I love the growth behind it, like also from my personal life. The most challenging aspects were, at the same time, I also have to say we were quite lucky. Like a lot of the things went really well. But essentially, we started out with a big pilot customer, the Caritas, where we developed the product with together. And we did like a big test phase in 22 facilities after 5 months, which was quite quick for such a big go live.
Yeah, of course.
And it was a very successful go live. And after that, I thought, hey, now let's talk about money, sign a contract, found the company, and then we're good to go. But it didn't work this way, because there were a few like fuck ups on the way, I would say.
Yes.
Where essentially we like had a great MVP, did a successful test phase. We also already verbally kind of agreed on the money for the contract. And after that, we realized that we're not ready to set up a contract. We don't have a company yet. So essentially, we weren't at the organizational level to close this basically enterprise with 10,000 employees. So we just were lacking the experience, did a few mistakes on the way, and essentially we didn't sign them on time. So we had like 3 months of January 2024 where we didn't have a salary and the future was very uncertain. Luckily, we applied for Exist the year before, which kicked in from March onward.
Wow.
And that enabled us to further develop the product, do the go-to-market, find other customers, and which we then closed. So then in July 2024 was our first revenue. Since then, growing, and now we're back to the previous customer now for a test phase, hopefully closing them also soon.
That's a nice circle. In the famous words of Steve Jobs, he also said that if you build on green fields, it's easy because there's nothing there yet. And like I'm similar to you actually. When I start something without even like thinking the whole process through. And then when I'm in that, while I'm in that, I see how complex everything is. It's beautiful that everything is complex. Like no matter what job you do or no matter what hobby you do, if you dig deep enough, there will be complexity for sure. But I think maybe it's not too bad to just start and then see, because when you're in the process, I have the feeling that you just move along with it. You tackle the problems and the risks that can come up with it by the day, and try to make the best out of it, and then suddenly it comes together to something bigger. You met your co-founders, and then you've mentioned that you had like a first prototyping experience. Maybe let's dive into that. You've worked together with Caritas, you mentioned.
Yeah.
Because working with a real world problem changes what is in your head as an idea, for sure. Maybe give us some insights into what happened there.
Yeah, maybe I can also share a little bit of background. Essentially, at Manager More, I learned design thinking. And then I also was like a design thinking coach for a year for a nonprofit, also in India and the Philippines. So I was teaching design thinking to students in India. And essentially, I realized I'm always teaching the same thing, like how to develop user-centric ideas, blah, blah, blah. And essentially, I thought to myself, like, I'm just teaching the same thing, but I'm not doing it myself anymore. So I decided to get my hands dirty, applied for the digital product school here in the Unternehmertum as a product manager. So I came back from India, and the program basically started in May 2023. And the whole idea of the digital product school is you bring together different teams. For me, it was a team of 5 people, a product team, so a product manager, a UX UI designer, and 3 engineers. One of them would focus on AI. And you let them explore a real problem from a real organization. So for us, we got the Caritas. So the CareMates team got the Caritas as a pilot partner. And we had 3 months to go from an initial problem statement to an MVP. And the initial problem statement was, how can we free up time on documentation from caregivers? Like I said, 1/3 of the time is bureaucracy, so that they have more time for actually doing the care. And essentially, we did what you then do, like with the design thinking background, you actually talk to the caregivers. So we got up very early in the morning, went to Erding on the car, and we just followed the caregivers around in their day-to-day business, from the office work to actually driving to the patients in the ambulatory care, and also the whole back office stuff. And then with all of these interviews and informations, we went back to the Unternehmertum here, and we mapped out the whole process on a chart to understand, okay, how is care actually done in Germany from a patient's journey? Like a patient starts, then you need to kind of do the whole onboarding process. Then you have to know what care to do. The caregiver has to drive to the patient, do the care, document it. And then you can go really granular here. And essentially, we then thought, to make a business out of it or to save time, basically we need to identify jobs that are done often and that need a lot of time. And then we basically identified a few opportunity areas. And one massive one was the patient admission process. which is currently done really manually. So when you're looking for a care facility for your grandmother or someone, you still have to call the facility during the working hours. And the secretaries then answer the phone call. They get around 5 requests a day, and they actually put the phone like on their shoulder, and then they ask for all of the personal information in like a half an hour call. And they don't even type it into a software, but they take it on paper because they love taking notes on paper. So this is the initial half an hour call. And then because they have so many requests, because there's more people in need of care than caregivers who can do the care, they would then take the request and put it in an analog folder. And when a care space is free, because, for example, a patient dies in a stationary home, then they would go through this folder and look for the right person from the care level, from the gender, from the starting date. And oftentimes, these requests are already like some time ago, so they would have to call up again and ask, is your request still valid? Because now we could go. And then they would drive to the patient, do another interview, draft the care documentation, like the contract, the care plan. And all of this takes around 5 hours. And we thought, like, this is super undigitized and repetitive work. Can't we come up with something to save time? And that's essentially then the starting point of CareMates.
That's incredible. That's such a structured approach to finding out a problem. Like it's a perfect example how to use design thinking within this modern world. I think there's many spots in Germany, especially in healthcare, where something like this is necessary, and it really frees up space for care. So, what would you say? How does it feel when you tested the first prototype and it worked?
Yeah, maybe I can also give context, because now I don't like define the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
And now, like, what's the solution to this?
Yeah.
What did we came up with as an idea? Essentially, our first MVP that we built had 2 components. So the initial idea was that we outsource the whole data collection process to the relatives. Why does a secretary have to ask for the information through the phone when there are so many requests? And so basically what we came up with was a digital onboarding questionnaire that you can send via email to the relatives, or you can also integrate it onto the website. So as a relative now, you can provide a care request 24/7 from your home and provide all of the personal information and some information regarding when should the care start, what services are you interested in, etc. And for the first MVP, it was basically coming up with this question catalog and using existing technology like Typeform to not build everything from scratch, because we wanted to test the concept if relatives would be willing to fill this out.
Just like for our listeners and watchers, so you've mentioned you use Typeform, so you try to keep the MVP as small as possible, right?
Essentially, you try to validate your idea, right? So you don't want to waste time having a pixel perfect UI or coming up with a perfect questionnaire technology when it's already out there. And then for the MVP, you have to ask yourself, what really brings value to the user, and what do you want to test? And for us, our hypothesis was that it brings value if the caregivers don't have to ask for the information on the phone and write it down anymore. So we could save time there. And at the same time, we didn't want to test the UI of the questionnaire. So using Typeform was super smart. But what we wanted to test is if the relatives are actually willing to fill it out, because valid uncertainty was that the relatives, like, for example, the husband of a 75-year-old woman, wouldn't have internet or wouldn't be willing to fill it out. So we just wanted to test in the real world how many of these forms that we send out via email or reached through the website would actually come back, where we could really save the time.
That's nice. That's perfect. That's a superb example on how to start up.
Yeah.
How to be a founder, validating with as least with validating with the minimum amount of resources spent, because starting up a venture, you don't have much.
Yeah.
Maybe let's go into that. Like, you've mentioned that you've been in the AI plus Munich program, and you've just mentioned that you were working on prototypes. So how did the program help you to validate or to start the first initial prototype?
Yeah, so it really helped us a lot, but differently to when we thought when we applied, actually. So I said, like, the one part of our technology was this questionnaire to get the data.
Yeah.
And another part of already the MVP was to create a structured PDF document out of the data. Because for every patient that is admissioned, you have to write a holistic health report to get information on all dimensions. How well can the person speak, hear? Is it dementia? How well can they move at home? And what sicknesses do they have? How is their social life structured? And also this the caregivers currently do with piece of paper and a pen, or they type it into a software, but they have to do it from scratch for every patient that's admissioned.
Yeah.
It costs around 1 to 1.5 hours if you do it properly. And they just don't have the time for this, so they do it too late or not at all. And this is also something that they are checked on, the care facilities. So if it's not there, they have to pay money, or they get a bad grade from the medizinische Dienst, or worst case, they even have to close. So also here we thought, not just getting like the personal information in this initial questionnaire, but also asking questions for all of these dimensions that the caregivers have to check on, and getting already first input from the relative, feeding this into an LLM to create the text for these 7 sections. And one part of it is also like a risk matrix, like based on how well they can speak, hear, see. Is there a risk of falling or them not getting the nutrition they need in the food, for example? So basically our first MVP was just plugging in ChatGPT for the beginning. And
The wrapper.
as a wrapper, basically, exactly. And using like a decision tree algorithm that we developed, not AI, but just like a logical decision tree, to come up with this risk matrix.
In these days, probably a decision tree would also be labeled as AI.
Yeah.
So all the patient's data is being input into a form. That raises the question in my head. We're in Germany. There's the DSGVO.
Yeah.
What's about that? Like, how hard is it to maneuver in a space that is highly regulated?
It's definitely a hurdle for the beginning. But I think one that data privacy is so important, like especially in the healthcare space. And at CareMates, we take it like really, really serious. But at the same time, it shouldn't block someone from coming up with a technology in that area, because data privacy is, for the beginning, a jungle that you have to go through. Like, how do you set your technology up in a way that, for example, all the data stays in Germany? Or if you use AI, that you anonymize or pseudonymize the data, for example, that you host the large language model yourself, for example. Like, these are things that you have to understand first, and then, of course, also implement on a technical level. But then you also have all of the organizational measures that you have to do to be data privacy conform. So you have both of these aspects. You have to understand it first, but then you get through it. And then I would say now it's not a problem anymore for us. But in the beginning, like, I had a lot of anxiety towards this, especially with the first test phase that we did, where basically now we sign an AV contract with every customer of ours that we can process data in their name. And this was also something that I didn't know for the first test phase. So it came up very late. Like, we already had the onboarding scheduled, like the test phase goes live with 100 users. We did the 3 onboardings, and then 2 weeks later they should start. And all of a sudden the question came up, like, okay, who's actually liable for
the data
if something happens?
Yeah.
And so we like got into it, understood, okay, we have to do like an AV document. We then paid a company to set this document up for us, because like there's a lot of support out there as well. You just have to pay for it sometimes.
Yeah.
And essentially, we couldn't get it signed on time. That was a problem, because working with a big enterprise like the Caritas, they have their processes that they have to go through.
Yeah.
And essentially, we didn't get the signature. So the question is, what do we do? And there, we made the decision to go live anyway. And I think that's something that also shows that you have to take some risk as an entrepreneur.
Silicon Valley mentality.
Definitely.
Don't ask.
Yeah.
Just do it.
So basically I was liable for the test phase. It was like my name under it. We just went live, and if someone would have had a problem, I would have to like deal with it. But you know, like I had so much trust in how we built the first MVP, and also in we're doing something good here, that I knew, like, even if something bad happens, like I did it with best intention, the reward is much higher than the risk. So we just took the risk, and yeah, we didn't have a liability problem, luckily.
Yeah.
So we're still alive, and now of course we only start test phases and contracts if we really have this AV document.
Yeah.
So that's something that nowadays I wouldn't do anymore in the same way. But looking back, if we wouldn't have taken the risk, done this, then CareMates maybe would have never become what it is today.
And also taking that small steps, because as you just mentioned, a challenge comes up later that you wouldn't even have thought of in the beginning. So planning everything from the beginning doesn't work, because you don't see what is coming.
Yeah.
You can only reduce that risk by taking the small steps, and then you have you're confident that your solution works, just like you said. And I think it's really, really nice, a nice approach by you, taking that risk, because I think CareMates is really beneficial for the whole society. And yeah, I wouldn't advise people here on the podcast to do that.
Neither would I, then.
Stay conform. But it's an approach that is well known in the startup world, of course. Like we see it with OpenAI. Like it wasn't clear how everything turns out with the data they trained on, and since now there's no complete clearness to that.
Yeah.
But they just did it, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But as you said, the founder is reliable. You have to know that if you do something like that, it's your person who's reliable, and from there. Hope that everything works out.
Yeah, and there's actually like also the story continued. So we just did a test phase without this AV contract. Then we wanted to close the deal, like I said, like in Christmas. And essentially it turned out that internally they didn't also stick to their process of normally getting this document signed, for example, because just everyone was very excited to push this project. So I guess we just like went over a department. Unfortunately, that's also something like I didn't even have the awareness back then that like corporates work this way.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't take the full blame, although like knowing that I definitely also pushed in a nice way to like, hey, let's make this happen, and like let's just start. I would take the liability,
of course.
And essentially that fell on our feet, because essentially got rolled up, like that this AV contract wasn't signed on time, and still like we and they were kind of pushing to get it signed like later for the starting date.
Maybe just like a small breaker for the listeners and watchers. What is an AV contract?
An AV contract is an Auftragsverarbeitungsdokument, which basically says we can process data in the name of the customer. So we are like the middleman in between the technology provider. So we thought it would be the right thing to get this document signed, like looking back.
Yeah.
Which turned out to be a problem, because internally they thought, hey, this whole project was done very unprofessionally because you just started without this AV contract, now want the signature. And this wasn't even something that we necessarily pushed a lot, but we just thought that's the best thing to do to have this project settled. And this was kind of then also where like everything looked so perfect, and then this was definitely a blocker, where it turned out, hey, we have to like internally figure this out first, and then we can continue talking again and bring the software live, having like a contract. So we were there like without this customer then, and also understanding like so many learnings from this experience.
Of course, yeah.
Because now I understand how corporates work. Like you have to go through MAV, like the Mitarbeitervertretung. You have to go through IT, through legal, data privacy first, before you start a test phase and expect to have a quick conversion as a customer.
It's a different language, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think like Also in academia, it's a different language, and founders have a different language. It's all about perspectives, and you have to experience the perspective of the counterpart to understand it. And so huge learning on that side. I totally see that.
Yeah.
So
And essentially, I also see it as not necessarily something bad that happened, but it was like really important for our learning and my learning as a founder and as a startup. But corporates work differently. You have to also adjust to that. But at the same time, also for corporates to also see, okay, this is also a way of doing it.
yeah,
And even though it kind of clashed, in the end, something great came out of it for all sides.
isn't there almost always something good in something bad from a founder's perspective, from a startup perspective? Like, you didn't get the customer. Well, great, because you've learned something. You will be better with the next customer. You didn't close the funding. Seems bad, but maybe it wasn't meant to be, and
Yeah.
you've learned a lot, and you will iterate, and the next round will be even better than the round before.
I fully agree, because I mean, we're humans, mistakes happen, and these are always the biggest learning opportunities. And in a way, it's then the founder mentality to not be like shaken down by these pitfalls, to lose your trust and your confidence, but to own up for the mistake, to get the learning, and to stay positive, and to do what now has to be done to kind of do something good, to create a new opportunity. Or sometimes even like a negative experience can create the opportunity for exactly this sense, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for us, it was also asking ourselves, like, how can we own up to this mistake? We drafted a communication paper. We like had a very proactive communication. We understood that they also need time to restructure, to also then not push from an anxiety of like, okay, let's figure this out immediately and then we can sign the contract. But sometimes you just need to like own up for the mistake, apologize, offer a proactive solution, then give space, let like grass run over it, and then you can like come back,
Yeah.
and then they respect you because you owned up for your mistake, and you can continue like
Yeah.
we're doing it now in February.
Yeah. Well,
with this customer. Yeah.
I just want to say we'll come back to that, because the partnership started again. I fully agree with you and what you've said, but I can imagine that in the moment it felt really hard losing that customer, and probably the team was a bit devastated. How did you manage in the team to stay motivated on the mission and on what you were thinking of, and on the vision that you had?
Essentially, it was also the process overall took longer than we expected. So we could already feel like maybe we should de-risk our business by applying for Exist, by finding other pilot customers. So we weren't just waiting and hoping for this one thing to turn out, because we could feel like, okay, this isn't going as we expected. So we invested our energy into creating new opportunities for ourselves. And so at the time where we got the call that something's wrong and it's not going to happen the way we wanted to, we were already like in a deep hackathon for a new go live of another big Caritas organization. Plus we had Exist as a financial stability from March onward. For 3 of us co-founders, we still had like unresolved salary for that one co-founder. But already there, of course, it sucked to get this phone call. I still remember us sitting here in the collab. I was just on the phone, and then I got the team together and just shared this. And everyone was kind of like a bit down, but at the same time, everyone was like, okay, now I continue to code, because like,
Yeah.
we have something to do here, like for the next go live. So that definitely helped to know that you have other things that you can work on that will move this forward. To use your energy with something that actually can get you somewhere. And
From that moment on, you've already had like a vague understanding on how the finished product will look like. You've had an MVP, you've built the first prototype, and how did the work with Caritas shape that second prototype?
yeah, so there like so we speak of the Caritas,
Yeah.
but really the Caritas is several organizations. Like it's very
Nice to know. Yeah.
every like Bundesland in Germany has like an own Caritas organization, more or less. Like it's more complex than that, but you can imagine there's a Caritas in Bayern, and there's one in Eichstätt, and there's one in Augsburg, and Berlin, etc.
With different rules?
Different logics, different, different, but they still have a similar culture as well. It helped us so much to develop our first MVP and to have the founding history together with the Caritas, with one facility, because it already gives us so much trust and experience in the market. And that's maybe one big learning, of course, but it's obvious, like, don't develop your technology like in your room, knowing what the users want, but you have to do it with someone. So for us, it really had to have this project partner. So in the first go live, we had super interesting learnings on our product. We could validate that the questionnaire is accepted, but we understood that the onboarding process is done differently on every of the 22 facilities. So they need basically a more individual approach, where we had one questionnaire for all, and sometimes a facility wants to ask for the religion, sometimes not, sometimes they want a long questionnaire, sometimes a short. So that was also learning, and then many more. And for our second go live with another Caritas organization, I think that really helped us to find product market fit, because the users were very picky there.
Nice.
And the first one was in an ambulatory setting, which is like half of the care in Germany is ambulatory. Patient lives at home, caregiver drives there. And now we did a go live in the stationary facility, where the patient moves into the care facility. And that's the other half of the market in Germany, basically. And both of them have similar problems, but also not exact. So doing a test phase here and doing one there really helped us to get both perspectives, to build one product which works for both use cases.
Like in a dynamic approach, dependent on if you're stationary or if you're ambulant.
Of the questionnaire, but even for every facility within the stationary or ambulatory section.
That's great. And when did the AI integration and the risk management integration you were just briefly talking about come into that play? Like,
it was already for the first MVP, but like I said, it was also with using like OpenAI, and then we understood we have to have all of the technology running on servers in Germany. So we had to definitely do a lot of refactoring. The base logic stayed, but we refined it for the whole decision tree that we developed, like the weights and stuff. And also, one important learning was you don't have to move all of the information into the first questionnaire, because essentially you have one questionnaire, and we learned that for the second test phase. You have one questionnaire which is kind of short to get the basic information, to validate if you can take this patient in. And then we basically have a Kanban CRM where you can then move the patient from initial request, where you have the first data, into the wait list, or to start the admission. And when you start the admission, then we send out another email with a second questionnaire where we get all of the health data. And this helps because you don't need all of this health data already for just a request. And from this, then we generated this document again.
That's some prime operations management there. Finding the right processes, getting the right information at the right time to reduce the load on the customer or on the patient in your case.
And that's also coming back to a question you already asked some time ago. Like with AI plus Munich, we generally see so much potential in AI for the care sector to generate certain documents, to have a tailored care approach for the patients where AI can really help. So this was our vision, like, let's bring AI here as much as we can. Essentially what we realized, and that was after we also got into AI plus Munich, that we have to lay the base foundation first of a nice digital process for the patient admissions. We need to collect some more data first through the questionnaires. And once we have all of this base technology, like for example, to give them a CRM with automatic emails, generating this document with the AI was also already providing a lot of value. But before we go deeper into this AI value drivers, we had to build integrations into the central care software, etc.
Of course, yeah.
So this is what we've been doing in the last year. And now we won a big research project to develop more AI that we can now actually build with our experience, with our infrastructure, with our foundation that we have built in the last year.
I have a lot of friends who are now doctors, young doctors, and they are screaming for AI integration within medicine, within health tech. What they've told me is that there's two sets of people within healthcare, the traditionalists and the innovators.
Yeah.
Have you had the same experience that with some people it was really easy to work with and some were really not happy to see something like AI in their space because probably they don't even know what AI really is? Have you had the same experience?
Not in an extreme form, but there are definitely biases. Like when you say AI, there are people that see like the risks, the robots taking over, and then there are the people or the jobs getting like taken away, and then there are the people that see the opportunities that maybe are even too enthusiastic in a way as well. It's not just about developing cool technology with AI, but it's also about the whole communication behind it. How can you make it trustworthy? How can you make it safe? And how can you make it user-friendly as well? And there, it's a classic example, right? If you would talk to an investor, you would say, hey, we're like the AI company in the elderly care space. But if I talk to a CEO of a care facility, they don't care for the AI. They care that we save time and help their staff. So there we wouldn't promote it as dominantly as we would, for example, on stage. You know what I mean? So it's also addressing the audience in a way. But then there are also CEOs of care facilities that just want AI because they believe AI can bridge the gap for the last 20 years that they couldn't do with digitization. And to a degree you can, but you shouldn't forget about the low-hanging fruits of digitization on the way.
Of course.
And that also brings me into like something that's also very important to me. It's not just about like developing cool AI and then bringing it into a product, but you have to think about how can the users trust this and how can the users use it and how do you want it to be used? Like for us, for example, this document that we generate, it's mainly there for the folder, let's say, for this, for the quality management. But, so it's not about like life or death, but at the same time, we still want to make sure that when we AI generate this document, that someone looks over it. So we explicitly mentioned like in a very big info box, like this is AI generated. It's crucial that you check it and then you have to like edit it before you can export it into the central care software basically. So we actively integrate friction into our product, which normally you wouldn't want to do.
Of course, yeah.
Because we have a responsibility for this. And showing this and sharing this also with the skeptics in the market also makes them, okay, you guys have done your homework, you know the risk behind it, but you're taking responsibility, building this product in a nice way.
Yeah.
And those are also thoughts that you have to put into building an AI product, I would say.
It's really an interesting insight to see that building an AI company has also an education component, just because the technology is implemented so in a new way that it hadn't been before, because AI is not new. Like as we all know, also the listeners and viewers will know that AI comes from the 60s, 50s, but it's not been implemented like that. Like that's the new thing. So I think there's a lot of education to be done. So we've talked about fuck-ups before a little bit, and like what can go wrong. Was there something that went wrong with all the implementation of the first pilots?
Thanks for joining us for the first part of this episode. We hope you enjoyed the discussion so far. If you're ready to keep the conversation going, part 2 is already available right here in the playlist. We appreciate you listening, and we can't wait to have you back for the rest of the story.